Hi. Well, uh, is this like an emergency version of that? It could be. I'm sure we'll do something after the Lane Lambert conference, press conference on Monday. That'll be interesting.
Hmm.
Um, Welcome. We'll do this. This is an emergency episode of Keeping Up with the Seattle Kraken. We got a new face, in case you can't tell from the mullet to my side. Is it still a mullet? I don't
I don't
know.
know. It's shaggy. I don't know. It's hair.
I'm not a big hair expert here, considering the two people on the show have a lot more of it than I do. Miracle's joining us, as you've seen from our press release that we put out yesterday. And then I like freaked out Miracle because of it got a good amount of traction.
That's a lot.
um, yeah, so Miracle will be joining Jade and I for our Kraken stuff. Obviously, as I mentioned, we'll be doing some more with hockey coverage in the near future. Um, but they gave us stuff to talk about today,
Didn't
because
waste any time, did they?
no, they said, "Here, buddy, you're gonna have something to think about immediately." By you know, I could use the word that they use, which is so PR, relieved of duties. They fired uh effectively Dave Lowry and Steve Briere, which
Boo. Hmm.
yes, sure, we could. You're terrible. Um, yeah, no, I mean the it's funny, the press release is very like not to the point. It goes Seattle Kraken issue coaching staff update. Um, as Lane Lambert evaluates the coaching staff, we've made the decision to relieve assistant coach Dave Lowry and goaltending coach Steve Briere of their duties. Um, I will give thoughts on this, but we're going to throw you into the fire immediately, Miracle, since you're new here.
Cool.
Uh, you had some reaction to this from a tweet. It didn't directly say, but you know, what do you think about this? Because obviously, it seems like the net reaction from what I've seen online, at least how I feel deep inside, besides like my cold dead heart, is that this is not the greatest decision that this franchise has made. So where do you sit on this? And then Jade, I'll go to you before I come back and I just start getting really angry.
It's not my favorite. I don't understand it. Um, I guess between the two of them, Dave, I understand a little more. Like he oversaw the PK and we were what, 21st? So like,
Oof.
okay, if you're gonna look at it that way, I guess. But I have a really hard time with Steve. Really hard time with Steve because out of our current roster, like looking at the last season, the goalies were the two that showed up the most and the most often. So like, why? Why? It doesn't make any sense to me to get rid of the guy who is, well, not necessarily responsible for that, but like helped drive that the most. I don't know. It just there are other options I think that we could have let go before we got rid of Steve and even Dave, honestly. So I don't know. It's stupid. I think it's stupid.
I completely agree with all of that. I was a little bit shocked about Steve, and Charles and I talked about it on the most recent normal episode of the podcast, and I just that one doesn't make any sense to me. Especially with Joey having the season that he did, and them wanting to turn him into the starter. Like the only goaltender that the Kraken have basically is how they're trading it, which I also think is a mistake, but
Yeah, well,
that's a story for a different day. But I was pretty shocked at that. I agree with what you said about Dave making a little bit more sense, but even then, there there's another coach that I'm looking at that should have been
yup.
let go first, um, before either of them. And yeah, I understand that, every time a coach is hired, and I think Jeff Baker put out an article, and I think he said that the shelf life for a coach is like 2.5 seasons or something now. So I understand that um they want to bring in their own people so that they kind of know who they're working with, but it also gets to a point where you have this coach that's doing really well with the players that they're in charge of. Why are you taking that away from those players? So I don't know. That's, I guess, my thoughts. Confusion. Not super thrilled.
Have we had anyone other than Hackstall that made it close to 2.5? No, right? Because Disco was
Oh,
what?
No.
um,
Like
oh,
assistant coaches, these two were it, right?
oh,
Steve and
that's right.
Mike
I think
Benton put out
it's
a tweet
yeah.
today with, hold on, I'm pulling
because
it up.
Steve came in with Hack, right? He brought him
Uh,
from the Leafs with him,
No,
kind of.
he
No?
brought Andrew Allen was the goaltending coach for the
oh,
inaugural
that's right.
season. And then in 22-23 they brought in Steve.
Okay, so he came in. Okay.
Yep.
But
Uh
even still, that's
Dave
longer than.
Lowry made it 3 seasons.
Oh,
And
so
then
he's,
Steve, I guess, also made it 3 seasons.
yeah, so they were the most tenured, I guess.
Yep.
Jesus
So
Christ.
your coaches that have been here the longest are your video guys, and all hail Tim Ohashi,
Oh,
Yep.
man.
and Brady Morgan, who's also been here. But
If
oh, I don't even want to think
Don't
about
even
that.
think about it.
I'm not
I,
gonna say it. I was like, if no, no.
we all know what was just thought of, and we
Yeah, and I
all
got
like
stabbed real fast.
um this is our I could tell this is gonna be fun. Um yeah. Well, and it's a great point with Bob Woods because I've kind of forgot about respectfully, I forgot about him when they signed him. But also, yeah, what is that about? Because you talk about this guy, and it needs to be said because a lot of people put, you know, I think it's because she's a woman, but because of Jessica Campbell
No,
and the talk
never.
about her on the power play, right? It's just,
Hmm.
oh, she's the reason power play suck. And there's no like responsibility on Bob Woods, who also was brought in to help with that as well. There's
Yep.
no response on the old man, right? Especially not in this sport, God forbid. So yeah, I'm pretty surprised about that, especially considering that Woods, is supposed to have of the responsibility on the decor. And again, a lot of people were really questioning, and both of you know this because I've said it to you, one on one or in the group chat I was in previously, right? Like the defense was pretty fine before this year. Like I'm not saying
Hmm.
it was like the best D in the league, pause, but like it wasn't as bad as it was this past season.
Yep.
And then all of the sudden, and it's mostly the same. You throw in Brandon Montour, who should elevate that decor, and Josh Mahura, who is pretty solid. I'm not saying he's the greatest, but Jade and I talked about it. I mean, he filled a pretty solid role. And all of a sudden, they get astronomically ass. Like, the correlation, causation by correlation. Like, that, and then Miracle mentioned, I kind of forgot about it, that Dave Lowry was part of the PK. Yeah, as far as I can remember, as someone who does like the stats post every game, right? The PK has always been in like the lower third of the league. It's never been super great.
No.
Like the power play has also not been great. Like special teams here have been horrible, right?
Yep.
I
But
think it was
like,
like 18 point something. I checked earlier. I think it's like 18 point something for the last season for the power play. So yeah, we were
Cool.
not. Yeah, great. I think it was like 18.9 is what it said. And I was like, oh, we're not going to mention that, but I mentioned it. So it's fine.
oh yeah. Well, I mean, and I just did a PWHL video with Silvia, who does our PWHL stuff now. And it felt like I kept coming back to like dunk on the Kraken, but also like
Well,
it feels like the two franchises are going in different directions. While one
Hmm.
still hasn't played on the ice, they've seemingly done everything right. And for a while, when the Kraken were started as an expansion team, it felt like they did that right with the branding. And then they signed Dave Hackstall, and people were like, wait, whoa, you were doing everything right. You know, Dave is another discussion. I mean, because we got coaches, like I guess we could have that discussion. But yeah, anyway, to go back to it, my reactions on this, because you've both shared it. I went off the rails a little bit there, which happened. Miracle, you'll find that this happens a lot when we do these shows. Um, but yeah, of the two, sure, I can understand with Lowry because it always felt like he was like kind of the number two on the staff of Hackstall and Bilesma. And so I had like with that, I was like, oh, I think we talked about it last week, Jade, but it was like, oh, someone to provide some continuity and some transition help between the
Hmm.
coaching staffs. Like, God, he would have seen three coaches in 3 years. Yeah. Um, I that's where I thought it would have made sense to have him around. But yeah, Briere would we might have even said it last week, Jade, but I think Briere would have been at the bottom of the people to move
Yep.
from that snap. Not counting the video guys, because again, those guys are perfect and they do nothing wrong. And
Don't touch them ever.
an Asian represent, yeah, no, there is literally no reason for you to touch your video guys because of the help that they've given you throughout the years. Like this franchise has done a lot of wrong, but their video guys are not one of them. I don't understand what the hell the decision is with Steve Briere. Like,
Do you think Lane has someone in mind already that he's like, we got to get this guy out so I can bring
I
Buddy
hope so.
over?
Yeah, and that was where my mind was gonna go with that is you better fucking have normally I like to limit the bad things I say on this show, but it's this is
Warranted.
blasphemy. Yeah, I mean like you better have an idea of what you're going to do with that. Um because if not, you can't bring him back.
Yep.
It would be extremely difficult to say, "Hey, we fired you. Can you come back and help?"
Yeah.
Uh
Just kidding. We actually made a huge mistake and now we realize it. Can you come back, please?
My
yeah,
bad.
we did an oopsie.
Hmm.
So do you mind like just accepting the egg on your face that we've given you? Like we're gonna slap you in the face. We need you to come back.
Yep.
While the mark is still on your face for being slapped. So logically, which isn't always a thing, uh yeah, he's got someone in mind, but again, you talk about with what Jade mentioned, right, with Joey coming up and how they've handled the goaltender operation over the even going whether it was Dan or Dave, because Dan was a little bit better, but it was still riding the shit out of the hot guy, and it was
Mhm.
a pause. That was typically Joey. Um, like also I was thinking about this as I was getting ready, right? And I'm sure I don't think it'll be that much of a thing. But how does your guy who you've signed to an extent, which now kicks in this year, right? His
Hmm.
extension kicks in this year. How does your number one goaltender feel about this? Because,
I would love to know.
Yeah.
like he is your franchise. Again, you don't have a superstar right now. Sure, one of the guys in your farm system or like a Shane Wright, maybe Maddie, but I put more onus of that on Shane just because that's what I've seen and that's how I feel. That's part of the reason the podcast exists is so that people can talk about how they feel. You don't have a superstar.
Yep.
The closest thing you have is Joey Decord, whether that's on the ice or off the ice, even if he has taste in a bad soccer team. Um, and you nearly ran him into the ground last year. Now you've fired the goalie coach who was a large part of helping him, reinvent himself here in Seattle. Because yes, he'd been at the NHL level at times before, but obviously his NHL like tenure has been here,
Yeah.
right?
I talk a lot about just kind of into the ether on Twitter about
Yep.
how it takes so long for goalies to develop in the first place. Like it's not like a center where you have this, incredible skill and you can get on the ice on any team and go be the star center of a team or whatever. Goalies take so much longer to get to that point where they are, really most of them at least take so much longer to get to that point where they're a really good, solid, like confident goalie.
Yeah.
And I, yeah, like you were saying that this is where Joey's played most of his NHL time, and I would think that a large part of that comes from Steve. And yeah, I also wonder how what's he thinking right now? How does he feel?
Because you talk about and we'll go back to the language because again part of my job here part of our job will be is over analysis, right, is looking at what is presented. You go to the release, it says as Lane Lambert evaluates the coaching staff, and the quote is from Botterill. Did has That was another thing I was thinking about. Has Lane talked to any of the players? Have you connected with any of your players? I know Mike Benton had some quotes about how they had talked to Jordan Eberle, because Jordan knew him from the Islander days, which sure, that's your captain. Understandable in that regard. But also, again, feels like your goaltender is important considering the contract that he's on to be here, what, 5 years, if I remember
I
correctly?
think it's a 5 by 5.
Yeah. So again, 5 years, which considering Kraken head coach tenure is longer than any of the coaches have been here historically and could be here. Feels like you should talk to him, especially if you're going to fire his position coach. So I that's something we'll have to wonder. I have no idea if we'll have that answered on Monday. Um, you know, I have a lot of issue with this, and I know you guys have said your piece, and I'm kind of ranting here, but it feels like another mistake in the operation of this franchise because it seems like you had all the momentum after year two, right? You just pushed the Dallas Stars to the brink of Game 7. You were a few minutes away from playing the Golden Knights, and they would have got the fucking media storm for that one. Two expansion teams meet in the Western Conference Final. Like, sure, NHL would have gone all horny about that. Maybe they should have rigged it then. Fucking Wyatt Johnston scoring on Philip Grubauer in the I'll never forget that. I hated watching that from the watch party that had to climb at Pledge Arena. But anyway,
I
you
can't
had
hate
all this
Wyatt. I'm
excitement.
sorry.
You had all this momentum, right? After year two. Anybody with a brain that could look ahead knew that wasn't sustainable and that you needed to add. You added Tyler Yamamoto, Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, and Brian Dumoulin. They're all great human beings. Don't get me wrong, but that is not what you needed to do in terms of addition. They haven't really traded for a superstar. There's been a ton of movement over the last 4 years, right? In terms of stars, there have been a ton of players who have moved. Uh, you've gotten Oliver Bjorkstrand, who great player. I think you like a championship team needs an Oliver Bjorkstrand. I do, but you need more than that. You traded for Andre Burakovsky. No, sorry, you signed him. He broke after his pelvis exploded after the All-Star break in year two. Right? Sorry. But also, I'm not too sorry because like you talk about so often, especially the last year, right? And maybe the last few months, they've talked about the decisions being made to, bring you to a contender and being in the best interest of winning.
Is it though?
Yeah. What are we winning
Yeah.
exactly? Like the biggest loser award? Like I
Nothing
don't
good.
because you want to talk about I mentioned this being one of the more interesting jobs in this interesting teams, sorry, in this city because of the cap space and the draft capital that you've got, right? Every week, you know, kind of since Bilesma was fired, I felt less comfortable with that because who the fuck is going to want to play here if you've got a coach who just signed here and hasn't really had a strong success history when he's been a head coach, which is 1.5 seasons. Who could be fired after 1 year, given what happened with Bilesma. Um, you've got a GM whose only history as a general manager was fucking up in East Buffalo, which again, we could look at the Sabres being a dumpster fire as part of that, because they are, unfortunately. And a general manager who, sorry, no, a president of hockey ops, which is a raise, is a promotion for people who think it's not. That's a promotion that is higher than the general manager. But generally, up means promotion. Am I wrong?
No.
I mean, as far as I know,
Right.
up is
So
better. I don't know.
up is typically better. Um, it just right. I mean, you two are both going to find this funny because of ties to other hockey teams. What if you approach Mitch Marner? What the fuck is he going to say to you? Is he going to laugh immediately?
I'm
Like,
sure
is
I
he
he
mean,
going to
will.
laugh in your face? Right? Because at this point, despite the money that you might have to throw at him, what makes you a better destination than most of the teams in the league that are gonna come up with their checks and look at him?
Well, and also he's a good example. He wants to go to a team, a true contender. Seattle's not that. Seattle's not going to be that for,
years.
yeah,
They
despite
won't be
how
that.
much everybody wants to see Seattle in the playoffs again. And, fans are so like, so many fans are so positive, and I really love that for them. But there's just Seattle's just not that and won't be anytime soon.
They would need to win the offseason by a mile to do that.
Hmm.
And it already felt like they had a slim chance to do that,
Yep.
right?
It's so interesting to me because like the season that people about to get mad because I'm about to expose myself here. The season that I started watching hockey was the season I started watching at the
Ah,
beginning of the Kraken's second season, the beginning. So like I had no idea about their horrible inaugural season. I skipped all that. So I got here and I was like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So I got here for all the fun stuff. I was here for the playoffs. I was here for all of that. And it's so interesting to see how that team has like we were so high, we were so happy all the way up to the playoffs to what we've become now. And I'm
Hmm.
like, how did they build that? Because I wasn't around for that. Like, how did they do that? Shift to what we have now. I just feels like this huge disconnect to me. Like, I don't understand how we got here from there. Doesn't make sense to me. Like, I generally don't get it. What changed? Because that's not this. I have no, I don't want to say no faith. I have no hope at this point that we could do that again unless there was some huge, massive changes. And I just don't see them wanting to do that right now, which is really, really disheartening because it was fun. Like I loved that whole experience. It was amazing, especially as a new fan to come into that, to not
mhm.
really like with no expectations because I knew it was a new franchise. So I don't know. I got jaded real fast, I think, because of that. Like
Yeah.
the extreme highs to like now I'm like, well, cool. Here we are. It's just interesting.
It's difficult. I mean, so don't get me wrong. I think what did I do, Jade, on the last show? I was like, they gave me this for year two of the playoffs. Haven't opened it. It's sealed still. I'm gonna save it till they make them again. So this thing is gonna fucking age. Like I'm gonna get really tipsy. I get really drunk when I get really giggly when I get drunk. There you go. I can speak the English, missus. Like it's just it's failure after failure since year two. Um, and it's funny to say that, that they've had these failures because they also don't like to admit the failures that they've had, right? And I'm going to bring us into maybe an uncomfortable conversation
Uh-oh.
because Jade sent me this is that Mr. Cervalli, Frank apparently, not Frank.
Yeah,
Um,
I had to triple check that it wasn't Franck because he has been out and about lately and it keeps almost getting me.
stop it, Frank.
Good old Frank.
Um, that, and I just saw excuse me, I thought about this from, say a friend of us is at least CSS, the Sasquatch NHL, that, it might show, um, that they maybe have some change in thought, in buying out Philip Grubauer, which I believe, what was the wording that Frank had, not Frank, Jade?
So the original tweet was Frank put out this article that was seven potential buyout candidates, and I see it and I'm like, click on that, scroll through, no Grubauer. Okay, interesting. And somebody had replied to that article and said something about Grubauer not being on the list or what about Grubauer or something. And Frank said that Seattle won't be buying out Grubauer, and then the person replied and said source because, it's Twitter. And Frank replied me, period. So to Frank's knowledge, that's not
Oh, Jesus
on
Christ.
the table. But, things can change so quickly.
Sure. And I mean, like, even last show, right? Frank, I talked about how, Frank had mentioned the Kraken, from what he knew, the Kraken had interviewed Rocket and offered him, on the long, it's like an hour long. I could go and watch it. Maybe one day I'll listen to it like a podcast. I'll have it in the background. Right now it's just Vanilla Mace. Um, but Botterill said that they had not offered anybody. And so I was like, okay. And then I followed up with someone I know in the organization, and I was like, so is that real or is this performative? And oops, they go, no, they didn't offer anyone. And I was like, interesting. And this was before Lambert. So I mean, yeah, sure, people can get shit wrong, but
Frank is also not always
Frank,
the most
Frank,
reliable.
Frank. Sorry,
So,
I'm just coming up with different names that aren't Frank. Um, so yeah, that could be horseshit. Um, but I've said this numerous times as the season ended, right? This franchise does not like to admit mistakes. But and that could just be the people that are in charge with Francis down to because I mean Francis family is pretty well ingrained in this organization. You can go and look at the staff site and see
mhm.
that, right? Um, they don't like to admit mistakes. So that's why I was worried, as Jade heard, and I might have said this to Miracle at some point. Miracle has heard a lot of the shit I've said, good and bad. That they might look at how Andre Burakovsky failed down the stretch and say, "Hey, we're going to hold on to you again." When they probably should move on to not only clear up space in the forward group to add more talent, just plainly, but also maybe free up some more money.
Mhm.
Don't think they'll do that. And I Philip as a human is an excellent person, excellent human being. Whether it's how he dealt with the media, uh, including me. Hello. Or working with fans. Despite the hate that he got from this fan base, he was always at these events, right? He always was doing the signing events, signing for fans. Our friend, I'm sure you might know them, Miracle, but Tay, who does the Harang
Hmm.
Hey, always like
Love Tay.
he still does all of this, despite how the a good amount of this fan base treats him. I still think he should be bought out. Like I can separate that feeling there, right? It's a monumental mistake. Not only I think for him it would be better to get a new situation. Um it frees up some money for UFC or Seattle. You admit a mistake that Ronald Francis we were if we shorten the names of the GMs, it's Gmurf, right? GM Ron Francis
Mhm.
Gmurf. GM Megan Turner is Gmint. Botterill doesn't make Gumjb.
Mm,
He doesn't
GMJB.
don't like it. Doesn't work. Get a new one.
several things about that I don't like.
Yeah.
Um. So yeah, I mean, we still have to get through the Stanley Cup final before we get to that buyout window, right? But it's not good.
Yeah.
I'm nervous.
I don't know.
I don't have a whole lot of faith or hope in what the team is doing right now. And, as a fan, that's not fun. As far as writing goes, that's extra not fun because I feel like I'm just always waiting for something to happen.
The
Like
other
I'm
shoe to drop.
always, yeah.
Yeah.
I see the Kraken tweet and I'm like, oh God, what did they do? What did they do this time? And then it's
Now
always
what?
like retweeting a One Roof Foundation tweet or like Jeff Baker's articles that he's writing for NHL.com or whatever. And but every time I'm like, oh God, please, please no shenanigans today. So
Jesus.
yeah, I'm not feeling super confident.
Nope. Sorry, I said oh Jesus because an aggregator account just go made an article. The Kraken be getting new alternates next year. They literally said this. Fucking.
Are
See, this is
they gonna
why
do this thing they said they would do?
I know.
Yeah,
Who
What a
knows?
breaking
crazy thought.
news.
What a crazy thought. I need a lobotomy. Do you guys know anyone? Because
No, but if you figure it out, let me know.
I would like to think less. Oh man. Yeah, this is about we're a little over the time I thought we would do. Is there anything we didn't touch? Because obviously the main thing was to talk about Lowry and Briere. Is there anything I left on the table? You guys, you think we're good to get out of here?
I got nothing.
I don't know. I'm just sad.
Yes, just sad is how second hockey has been for 2 years now. All right.
Mhm. It's
So
like Coach
yeah,
had said, being a fan of Kraken hockey is like being a musician on the Titanic.
Just keep
Yep.
playing.
yeah. I will continue to hold on to the headline idea that I texted Jade, but
Hmm.
it very much feels like a sinking ship, but that ship never really made its maiden voyage. So anyway, until we see you next time. Yeah, I'll see what
We're
we're
gonna
gonna
end it
do.
on that.
Yeah,
That's
until we see it.
sad.
That's how I felt
Okay.
after, leaving exit interviews, and then I find out that Dan had been fired. I was like, oh, it's the end of
Well,
the season.
That was
Kick
sad.
me right in the balls. Then you could just line me up and done it. Fucking. Yeah. I'll see what we're doing timing wise. Oh, because Monday. Oh, yeah, Monday's a big day in Seattle hockey because of Lane Lambert's press conference and then the expansion draft for PWHL Seattle. So we'll figure timing out. Um, and we'll see when we can reconvene. Also because people have their own schedules, it's difficult to do that. So until we see you next time, as which is gonna my whole exit outro is very different than the negative stuff that Miracle pointed out.
I'm sorry.
Um, until we see you next time, take care of yourselves, be well, and do whatever you can to make today a great day.
Hey, Charles.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, where are you going to watch all those Kraken away games?
Kraken away games, making a push. I was thinking of coming here just because Rough and Tumble is the home of Circling Seattle sports, only if that's okay with you.
I mean, I love that idea. Hope to see you here.